Hey guys, what's up? It's All Things MTG here. Today I'm finally back, and today we'll be doing a deck profile. Well, deck tech, if whatever you want to call it. Um, today we're gonna be deck testing Esper Control in the current standard. Um, I find this deck works really well against uh many decks I've been facing up against. So let's get on with it. First, I'm going to start out with the creatures because I'm only running two creatures, and that, well, deciding the sideboard. That's Baral, the chief of he comes in really handy with that um uh less to cast, because I find um getting to most likely sometimes anticipate for 1 mana or even disallow for 2 um, is actually very useful. But I don't want to run more than 2 because it's just not going to be, it's going to flood the deck too much. Next I'm going to come with the main kill spells pretty much. Um, I'm running 2 copies of Stasis Snare and a copy of Thopter Arrest. I'm running Stasis Snare is pretty much self-explanatory. Thopter Arrest is, even though there's no flash into it, um, exiling target artifact, that really helps. And that double white can be hard to get sometimes. Um, and I find in testing Thopter Arrest just works out really well when coming up against especially vehicle decks. It's a good way to counter them. Next up, I'm going to come up with my counterspell. Well, I'm only running 4 copies of Disallow. That's the only counterspell that I'm going to be running, because I find in testing, I don't really need to counter magic that much, because in the format right now, you're not really seeing much things that really need to be countered. It's many just creature-based decks right now. So, and then and the other kill spell is 3 copies of Grasp of Darkness, just plain, and Ruinous Path, just to deal with creatures. Planeswalkers. And coming into the draw spells, I'm running 4 copies of Anticipate, and 4 copies of Glimmer of Genius. Glimmer of Genius is just a really good draw spell right now. Coming in, getting that 2 energy, really not really used in the main deck besides the Aether Hubs, but it's still scry 2, draw 2, it's just really good right now. Coming into the board wipe. The board wipe's going to be Fumigate for us. We're going to be running I'm running 5 copies of Fumigate, and it really works out that gaining life is actually really good sometimes. And just on turn 5, you can just board wipe and then pretty much take control from there on. Coming into hand destruction, 3 harshes, because it's 1 mana. That scry is really important. Finding out that turn 1, harsh and scry, taking a creature, also just looking at seeing what your opponent's pretty much playing. And there's also that 1 copy of Transgress the Mind, just in case coming up against other control decks, which is very rare. And the lands, here we go. Actually, we're gonna go to our 4 planeswalkers, really our main win conditions here. We're going to be running 4 copies of Gideon, the ally of the Zendikar. I find he really ends the game quick, and he's really good even in the early game, as he can make blockers for you, and you pretty much never emblem unless you're in. You could emblem maybe in game 2, but in game 1 you wouldn't. Pretty much you only use it as a 2/2 maker and a 5/5 attacker, just to finish off. And 1 copy of Nixilis is there to just ulti pretty much ends the game, and sometimes you might need to destroy a creature. Now we're gonna come into our lands here. We're gonna be running 4 copies of Aether Hub. Aether Hub really just fixes up our mana base, and 4 copies of Choked Estuary, just to once again just a really good dual land right now. 4 copies of Concealed Courtyard, because it's just very good right now, because the it's just a really good land that's working with our deck right now. Also 4 copies of Shambling Vent, just as a pretty much a 2. This can actually, in testing, Shambling Vent can actually win sometimes when you're up against a control deck. And just coming up with 3 islands, 3 plains, and 3 swamps. And you're probably wondering why I'm not running many lands that make blue mana, because if you look at the cards here, not most cards need double white and double black, and they could be hard to get at some times. Coming into the sideboard here, I'm running 1 copy of Sphinx, the Final Word. Once again, just bought it in against control decks. Transgress the Mind against control decks. Harsh against aggro decks, really hard aggro decks. That 1 copy of Fatal Push, most people run it in the main board, but I find that Stasis Snare, Thopter Arrest, and Grasp of Darkness is just better at this point. And just a Gideon to once again against control decks. Nixilis, just if your opponent's pretty much playing control, you need more threats to finish off the game. Ruinous Path against planeswalkers, and Confiscation Coup is actually really that 1 copy of Confiscation Coup actually really works out. When you know, like, it really helps when if your opponent is playing like a deck that has like this really big creature that is just good at it's good against control decks that use creatures to end games, because you can just take their win condition and use it against them. And there's lots of ways to use Confiscation Coup. Just that 1 copy, I find it is really helpful in the sideboard. 1 copy of Negate, just against artifact decks, which are huge right now, control decks, and 3 Fragmentize, once again just to deal with artifacts. Yeah, so this it's a really balanced Esper control deck. I've got many deck techs coming up. Thanks for watching, guys. Hope you enjoyed this deck tech, and if you did, please leave a like and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Bye bye.